Hello my strong friends, and welcome back to this week's video. Today we're going to talk about deadlift variation to wrap up our variations section. Make sure you check out the ebook component that goes along with this if you haven't already. The deadlift is of course my favorite lift, as you all know, and people like to argue a lot on competition stance. Figuring out your competition deadlift stance is like a key identifier to who you are as a powerlifter, which is kind of weird, but also kind of cool that we can talk about both and people are like really passionate about both. The options are conventional, as we know, which I usually suggest people start out with conventional pulling, or sumo, which is my competition stance with. Sometimes conventional pullers versus sumo pullers, people will have that debate, but really, as always, your competition pull will always be the one that you're most comfortable with and the one that you can lift the most weight on. I was actually experiencing soreness in my conventional deadlift when I first started pulling with it that I couldn't actually recover from, and once I switched to sumo and got to experiment a little bit with both and kind of get a feel for both and see which one I liked the most, I switched to sumo and realized that I didn't experience that problem that I did in the conventional pull. So that was what really drove me to make the change. Properly identifying this and understanding this will take that trial and error period that I myself went through. But I typically suggest that people start with a narrow stance and then bring it out if they have reason to, or bring it out whenever they are ready to try something new. You'll see sometimes lifters will lift with a hybrid of the two, so it looks a little bit more like a narrower stance sumo style, so keep an eye out for that. And as you start to become more and more advanced, you may find that maybe your initial stance can be brought in to optimize your lift for your leverages. It's really just dependent on the lifter. That's something that we can work together and change and figure out what you like. For lifters who regularly pull sumo, conventional is a great place to focus on hamstring and back strength, as I mentioned, and the opposite side of that is for lifters who typically pull conventional. Sumo deadlifting can be a great way to optimize strength in the glutes and hips and focus on not taxing your back so much. Now we're going to talk about some range of motion training. Now there's a couple different ways you can find variations on range of motion. The first one is the harder one, which is deficits, and that means you're pulling higher height than where your weight is. So your range of motion is longer and you're pulling at a deficit. So usually to set this up, what you wanna do is set up plates or set up some stable flat surface to where your feet are raised above the height of the weight. I typically program these at a 1 to 3 inch deficit. The idea here is that you're lengthening the range of motion, increasing time under tension under the bar, which will further develop extra strength and muscle growth. This can also be a great way to improve your grip strength, and it can definitely be a great tool if you particularly have problems with getting speed off of the floor. If you find that your deadlift takes forever to break, try to work in some deficit deadlifts to work on that slow off the floor, which is definitely something that I myself deal with. The other side of the coin is to work in some block pulls. So instead of creating a deficit, we're actually lifting the weights a little bit higher and the barbell a little bit higher so that we can overload the movement and probably lift more than what we can. Definitely lift more than what we can if the barbell were to be on the floor. Here again, I usually suggest to start with like 1 inch off the floor up to 4 inches. You can really raise this a bit higher and focus on the lockout portion of your lift. This is especially great for people who struggle locking out deadlifts, so that you can practice the lockout movement with a shortened range of motion for much heavier loads than what you'd actually be locking out in competition or in regular training. Another thing here, just make sure that you're pulling on a very flat and stable surface. Make sure that you're being careful. A lot of gyms will have rubber mats that you can use. The next movements that I want to talk about are Romanian and stiff leg deadlifts. These are great variations that can target more so your hamstrings, your glutes, and your back, like your erectors. They can get huge erectors and a huge back that looks great and will keep you really strong, especially in your deadlift. The movement pattern here is typically more challenging because you're taking out a lot of your leg strength, and it can help you get a greater training effect from a lighter load. The stiff leg deadlift is another variation where the bar is lifted from the floor to the hip while maintaining straight legs. By keeping your legs straight, you can remove the contribution of the quads from the lift and more directly target your posterior chain. Now this variation is a little bit more technical and we recommend it for more advanced lifters. This is why I like to program the RDLs instead of stiff leg deadlifts, as well as incorporating that variation in my own training. Now of course, we also have a lot of accessories that go along with deadlift training, but aren't as specific to the actual deadlift pull. I like to utilize movements that build my posterior chain, glute ham raises, and single leg RDLs, in addition to the movements that have already been mentioned. And also I like to focus on building a bigger back and lats with pull-ups, horizontal rows, and vertical pulls as well, and also improve my core strength with movements like dead bug, ab rollouts, and planks. And that's all I have for the deadlift variation video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and let me know what you think in any comments, and let me know if you also have any additional questions and I can answer them. Make sure you check out the ebook portion of this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.